In October 2009, in Cordoba, Argentina, Valeria Aguirre's life was tragically interrupted forever. While playing peacefully in front of her building, she disappeared without a trace. Just 2 days later, a forensic expert analyzing the lifeless body of the girl would find a biological trace that would reveal a shocking truth much closer than her family could have ever imagined. Before continuing, write in the comments where you're listening from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any case. Valeria was a lively girl, known for her contagious smile. She lived with her parents, Mariana and Diego, in a quiet apartment complex in a middle-class neighborhood, a place where children often played outside under the watchful eyes of the neighbors. The community was tight-knit, and everyone knew each other, creating a sense of security that would soon be shattered. One of the neighbors would later remember with sadness, "We always saw her running around here. She was the joy of the place. We prayed to God to guide the investigators and help them find answers." That afternoon, like many others, Valeria just wanted to enjoy the fresh air, unaware that her innocence was about to be stolen in the most cruel way possible. On the afternoon of October 22, 2009, life continued as usual. Around 6:45 p.m., Valeria was sitting on the grass in front of the building with her best friend, Sophia, playing a board game while the spring sun began to set. It was a peaceful and ordinary scene, the kind of moment that remains etched in memory, for no apparent reason, until tragedy redefines everything. Sophia's mother was watching them from the kitchen window, feeling calm, seeing them so close and safe. Nothing in the environment suggested the imminent danger that was about to strike, a danger that would change their lives forever in a matter of minutes. It was then that a light green sedan stopped near them. A man got out of the vehicle and approached with an expression that seemed concerned, asking if they could help him find his lost chihuahua. With the innocence characteristic of a child, Valeria immediately stood up to help, driven by compassion and the desire to do good, trait her family had always admired in her. Sophia, a little more shy, stayed behind watching the scene with curiosity. The man focused all his attention on Valeria, gaining her trust with soft words and a false vulnerability that concealed his true and terrifying intentions. In a quick and brutal move, the man grabbed Valeria, forced her into the car, and sped off, disappearing down the street. Sophia, paralyzed by shock for a moment, reacted and ran desperately to Valeria's apartment, shouting her mother's name. Terror overtook her as she realized the severity of what she had just witnessed. The tranquility of the afternoon was shattered in an instant, replaced by the echo of a frightened child's screams and the sound of an engine speeding away. The board game was left abandoned on the grass, in mute witness to the crime that had just occurred in broad daylight. Mariana heard the screams and ran outside, finding Sophia at the door, crying and out of breath. Understanding what had happened, Mariana's world collapsed. She ran toward the street, shouting Valeria's name with all her might, but it was already too late. The street was silent and desolately empty. The only trace of her daughter was the board game lying on the ground, an image that would be etched in her mind forever. The initial panic gave way to deep anguish and the terrible understanding that her daughter was in the hands of a complete stranger, completely defenseless. At that moment began the worst nightmare a mother can live. In her initial statement to the police, Mariana would describe the panic of that moment with a chilling clarity. It was a silence that hurt. 1 second she was there, and the next, the world went mute. I just wanted it to be a nightmare, that I would wake up and she would be in her room, she told the investigators. Her words reflected the shock and disbelief of a mother whose world had been shattered in the blink of an eye. Her testimony was key to initiating the investigation, but it also marked the beginning of a long and painful journey in search of justice for her little daughter. The call to the police was made minutes after the disappearance. Commissioner Lorenzo, an experienced investigator from the local police, took on the case and arrived at the scene quickly, immediately initiating the protocol for missing children. The priority was clear: act fast, as the first hours were crucial. The forensic team began to search the area, looking for any clue, however small, that the perpetrator of the crime might have left behind. Commissioner Lorenzo coordinated the initial actions with a mix of urgency and method, knowing that every second counted in the race against time to find Valeria alive, a hope that still clung strongly in the hearts of everyone present. An alert for Sofia was issued nationwide, broadcasting Valeria's photo, as well as a description of the suspect in the car, across all media outlets. The community reacted immediately with overwhelming solidarity. Hundreds of volunteers joined the police in organizing search groups, combing the neighborhood, nearby parks, and vacant lots throughout the night, armed with flashlights and the hope of finding the little girl. A volunteer commented to a local media outlet, "We are all parents here. We have faith in God that the truth will come to light and this nightmare will end soon." The massive mobilization showed the profound shock the case had caused in the community, united in grief and determination. That same night, Mariana made her first emotional plea on national television. With eyes filled with tears, but a voice trying to stay strong, she spoke directly to the perpetrator. "Please, please, return my daughter. She's just a little girl. Leave her in a safe place. Don't hurt her." Her words resonated throughout the country, turning Valeria's case into a national cause. Mariana's face, marked by anguish, became the symbol of a mother's fight to get her daughter back, generating a wave of empathy and support that crossed borders and united people. In a single prayer, the first 24 hours were a mix of frenetic activity and growing frustration. The police only had the description provided by Sofia and a composite sketch of the suspect, but no concrete leads about his whereabouts. Calls with potential sightings came in constantly, but they all turned out to be false alarms, increasing the anxiety of the family and wearing down the investigators. The initial hope began to give way to an ever-growing fear and the terrible sense that time was running out. Each hour that passed without news was a torment for the family, who clung to faith while the uncertainty became unbearable. On the morning of October 23rd, the worst possible news arrived. A man traveling along a remote rural road in a mountainous area, about 70 kilometers from where Valeria had been taken, noticed something unusual by the side of the road and called the authorities. It was the lifeless body of a little girl. The forensic team immediately transported to the scene, cordoning off the area to preserve any evidence. The atmosphere of hope that had prevailed, though fragile, completely dissipated, replaced by a somber resignation. The remote and quiet rural area suddenly became the scene of a tragedy that would shock the entire nation. Commissioner Lorenzo arrived at the scene and held a press conference hours later, confirming the identity with a voice cracked with emotion. "It is with deep sorrow that we inform you that the body found belongs to little Valeria. The search for her has ended, but our hunt for the responsible party has just begun," he declared to the media. His words confirmed the deepest fear of the family and the entire community. The investigation had taken a dramatic turn. It was no longer about a rescue, but a homicide investigation. The priority now was to find the perpetrator of this heinous act and bring him to justice. The autopsy, conducted on October 24th, confirmed that Valeria had been the victim of intimate violence and that the cause of her death was asphyxiation. However, amidst the immense tragedy, the forensic experts found the first solid piece of evidence, a ray of light in the darkness. During the examination, they carefully recovered from the victim's body a DNA sample that did not belong to her. This biological trace instantly became the most important lead in the case, a genetic signature of the perpetrator that, although anonymous at the time, represented the best and only hope to identify him and ensure he answered for his crime. The DNA in hand, but no suspect to compare it to, the investigation focused almost exclusively on the only other clue they had: the light green sedan. Detectives once again questioned Sophia, Valeria's friend, with the help of child psychologists, carefully trying to extract any additional details she could remember about the vehicle or its driver. Every nuance, every little recollection was meticulously analyzed with the hope of finding a thread to pull on. The car became an obsession for the investigators, the only tangible element that could lead them to the person responsible for such a horrific and senseless act. That anonymous tip directed the police's attention to a car with very similar characteristics, which was often parked in a neighborhood several kilometers away from the crime scene. Following this new lead, a surveillance team located the vehicle and identified its owner, a man with a history of minor crimes that were not related to offenses of this nature. Despite this, the coincidence was too significant to ignore. The hope that this was the missing piece of the puzzle grew among the team, who quietly prepared an operation to approach the suspect without alerting him. Taken to the police station for questioning, the man was evasive from the first moment, and his alibi for the afternoon when Valeria disappeared was weak and full of contradictions. His nervousness and unclear answers immediately raised the level of suspicion among the investigators. 4. A brief but intense period. Commissioner Lorenzo's team felt they were finally on the right track. It seemed the net was closing in, and that the resolution of the case was within reach. The pressure in the interrogation room was palpable as detectives tried to dismantle what seemed to be a web of lies. One detective, speaking anonymously to the local press, expressed cautious optimism that quickly filtered into the media. "We are investigating a person of great interest. We believe a resolution could be close," he stated. This declaration sparked a brief but intense spark of hope in a community still deeply affected and shaken by the brutality of the crime. People eagerly awaited news that would confirm the capture of the responsible party, trusting that justice would finally prevail and bring some peace to Valeria's family, a family still immersed in immense and devastating grief. However, a more thorough and detailed verification of the data revealed an unexpected truth. The man's alibi, although poorly explained at first due to his nervousness and mistrust of the police, turned out to be completely true. Security camera records from his workplace and the sworn testimony of his boss irrefutably confirmed that he had been working at the exact time Valeria was abducted. The lead, which had seemed so promising, completely vanished. It was a dead end, a new disappointment in an investigation that seemed to be going nowhere despite the efforts. Frustration took over the investigative team. Time kept passing, media and social pressure mounted, and they were back at square one. With an anonymous DNA profile and a vague description of a car. It was at that moment of stagnation and discouragement that Commissioner Lorenzo made a crucial decision that would radically change the course of the investigation. He decided to abandon the search for a random stranger and focus all the resources on a new and bold strategy, one that would lead them to look much closer than anyone had imagined. Until then, Commissioner Lorenzo gathered his team and proposed a new and daring strategy. Instead of continuing to search for a stranger in a universe of millions of people, he suggested they focus their efforts on the Aguirre family's social circle. The author of this crime may not be a total stranger. Sometimes the greatest danger hides in plain sight, he argued before his subordinates, urging them to re-examine the case from an entirely different perspective. This decision marked a turning point in the investigation, shifting the focus from an external search to a thorough introspection of the victim's immediate surroundings, a shift that would prove to be decisive. The investigators began to compile a detailed list of all the men who had some connection to the family and had visited the apartment complex in the months prior to the crime. This list included friends, distant relatives, maintenance workers, and anyone else who had access to the building. They then carefully cross-referenced these names with vehicle records, looking for owners of light green sedans or similar cars. It was a slow and meticulous job, but the new direction had restored their sense of purpose and the hope that this time they were on a path that would lead them to the truth. One name in particular caught the detectives' attention: Fabian, a distant acquaintance of the family. His profile matched disturbingly with the few details they had. He had occasional access to the complex. His physical appearance roughly matched the composite sketch created from Sophia's testimony. And most crucially, he owned a car that matched the description of the vehicle used in the crime. Suddenly, they had a viable suspect, a concrete person of interest, whose connection to the family made him a priority for the investigation. The missing piece of the puzzle might finally be within their reach. On October 27th, just 5 days after the crime, the detectives decided to act. They approached Fabian discreetly and invited him to the police station for an informal conversation about what he might have seen or heard related to the case. The strategy was to approach him without raising suspicion in order to assess his reaction and behavior firsthand. Fabian accepted the invitation without resistance, appearing calm and willing to cooperate with the authorities in any way necessary, an attitude that the experienced investigators observed with attention and caution. During the interrogation, Fabian maintained a remarkable composure, remaining calm and cooperative at all times. He firmly denied any involvement in the case, and in a gesture aimed at proving his innocence and dispelling any doubt about him, he voluntarily agreed to provide a DNA sample. According to his own words, he did so to help the investigators rule out suspects and expedite the search for the real culprit. His apparent confidence and willingness to collaborate left the detectives with a mix of hope and skepticism as they proceeded to collect the sample. The biological sample was carefully collected following all protocols and sent urgently to the forensic laboratory for analysis. For the investigators, that small vial contained the possible answer they had been desperately searching for over the past few days. The wait for the results began, filled with almost unbearable tension. A member of the investigative team would later comment, "At that moment, we could only trust in God's justice and in science. We knew we were very close." Each hour that passed increased the anticipation and anxiety as the fate of the case hung by a genetic thread. At the forensic laboratory, technicians worked tirelessly, aware of the urgency and importance of their task. The DNA sample voluntarily provided by Fabian was processed and analyzed with the most advanced technology available at the time. His genetic profile was meticulously compared with the profile obtained from the biological evidence found on Valeria's body. Every marker, every sequence was examined with millimetric precision. The atmosphere in the lab was one of absolute concentration, as everyone knew that the result of this comparison could solve one of the most atrocious and media-covered cases of the past few years. On October 28th, less than 24 hours after collecting the sample, the phone rang in Commissioner Lorenzo's office. On the other end of the line was the head of the forensic laboratory. His words were direct and blunt. "The match between the two samples is 100%. There is no margin for error or doubt. The genetic signature of the perpetrator and Fabian's are identical." In that instant, the investigation took a definitive turn. The anonymous suspect finally had a name and a face, and justice was one step closer. With the irrefutable scientific evidence in hand, Commissioner Lorenzo wasted no time. He went before a judge and immediately requested an arrest warrant for Fabian, formally accusing him of kidnapping, severe intimate abuse, and homicide. The evidence was so solid that the warrant was granted without delay. The judicial process began moving with the speed appropriate for the gravity of the crime. The net around Fabian was closing in definitively, and his capture was now just a matter of hours. The police team prepared to act with the utmost discretion and efficiency. A tactical team was mobilized to carry out the arrest. Officers surrounded Fabian's house stealthily, ensuring that all possible escape routes were covered to prevent any attempt at flight. The operation was planned and executed with surgical precision, aiming to minimize risks and ensure the capture of the suspect. Without incident. The tension in the air was palpable as the officers waited for the order to enter. Every team member knew the importance of their mission: to arrest the man who had taken the life of an innocent child and terrorized an entire community. When confronted by the police with the arrest warrant at the door of his house, the calm Fabian had shown until then completely evaporated. He didn't utter a single word, but his face transformed into a mask of shock and resignation. In that instant, he understood that his charade had come to an end and that there was no possible escape. The scientific evidence had cornered him. He was handcuffed and taken to a police vehicle without resistance, while neighbors watched the scene with a mix of astonishment and horror, unable to believe what they were witnessing. The news of the arrest quickly spread, causing a new wave of shock, even greater than the previous one, among the family and the community. The perpetrator of the crime was not a faceless stranger hidden in the shadows, as everyone had initially assumed. He was someone who had been among them, who had shared their space, and who had even offered his help with a smile on his face. The revelation was devastating and added a layer of betrayal to the immense pain they were already feeling. A relative of Valeria would later express, "May God forgive him, because we will never be able to. He took our angel away from us." One of the greatest mysteries that persisted, even after the case was resolved, was the motive behind the crime. Fabian never offered a coherent or logical explanation for his atrocious act. His complete lack of remorse or justification throughout. The judicial process left a disturbing void, making the tragedy even more incomprehensible and painful for the Aguirre family and for society in general. The absence of a reason turned the crime into an act of pure and arbitrary evil, a question without an answer that would continue to haunt everyone who knew and loved Valeria, and anyone who closely followed the case. The trial against Fabian began in 2012. The prosecution, led by a team of experienced professionals, built a solid and irrefutable case that centered mainly on two pillars of evidence that proved unbreakable and left no room for any reasonable doubt about his guilt. From day one, the courtroom was packed with intense media and public attention. The prosecution's strategy was clear from the start: to demonstrate the facts through scientific evidence and direct testimony, leaving no cracks for the defense. To exploit, the first pillar of the prosecution's case was the DNA evidence, which was presented to the jury as a genetic signature that unequivocally linked Fabian to the crime. Forensic experts explained in detail the analysis process and the statistical certainty of the match, making it clear that it was scientifically impossible for the sample to belong to anyone other than Fabian. The science, with its cold and objective language, left no room for interpretation. This evidence became the cornerstone of the case, silent yet eloquent, sealing the accused's fate before any other testimonies were even heard. The second pillar was the testimony of Sophia, Valeria's friend. Now older and more mature, she bravely took the stand and, with clarity and certainty that moved everyone present, pointed directly at Fabian and identified him without hesitation as the man who had taken her friend that fateful afternoon. Her testimony, full of an innocence shattered by trauma, was incredibly powerful and complemented the coldness of the scientific evidence perfectly. Her account of the events was consistent and firm, and her ability to recall crucial details impressed the court, dismantling any attempt by the defense to discredit her. The defense desperately tried to sow doubt, arguing that a child's testimony was unreliable and questioning the chain of custody of the DNA sample. However, their efforts were futile in the face of the overwhelming weight of the evidence presented by the prosecution. The combination of forensic science and eyewitness testimony created an impenetrable barrier that the defense could not overcome. Every attempt to find a crack in the prosecution's case was refuted with irrefutable facts and data, leaving the jury with only one clear conclusion: the guilt of the accused. The jury found Fabian guilty of all charges brought against him. The judge, echoing the gravity of the crime and the public outcry for justice, sentenced him to the maximum penalty allowed by the country's law: life imprisonment. In the courtroom, Mariana and Diego embraced, crying not out of joy, but from a deep and exhausting sense of relief, seeing that justice was finally served for their daughter. The sentence would not bring Valeria back, but it ensured that the man who had taken everything from them would spend the rest of his life behind bars. In the years following the verdict, Mariana decided to transform her immense pain into a positive and lasting action. She founded the organization La Voz de Valeria, a non-profit dedicated to educating children and parents about personal safety and advocating for stricter child protection policies. In this way, she made sure that the memory of her daughter would not be lost to oblivion, but would become a beacon of hope and prevention for other families. Valeria's legacy, through her mother's tireless work, lives on, protecting other children from suffering a similar fate. If you have followed this case to the end, please like the video, leave a comment about what you thought of the case, and be sure to subscribe and activate the notification bell. We will see you in the next case on our channel.